Gilbert Burns is far from impressed by UFC up-and-comer Islam Makhachev, and is almost certain that he will fall in his attempt to defeat Charles Oliveira at UFC 280 this October. Some people are willing to crown Makhachev the next best fighter in the UFC. However, Burns is completely unwilling to give him that achievement until he has proven it firsthand in the octagon. First up, Burns with some heavy criticism for the youngster. Gilbert Burns is one of the most respected fighters in the history of the UFC, and for good reason, which is why everyone is so concerned with what he has to say about the newest up-and-coming fighter in the UFC. Islam Makhachev has a so far sterling record in the big leagues, but his time in the octagon has been relatively short-lived. Makhachev has a pro record of 23-1, however, he has only been fighting in the UFC since 2015, which is why he's still classified as an up-and-comer in the league. But since he has been in the UFC, he has amassed a near-perfect record of 12-1, which of course is not too shabby, and makes it clear why some people are ready to view him as one of the best fighters in the entire UFC. However, Gilbert Burns thinks it's much too soon to be handing over that title to him. And not only that, but Burns was willing to express his very honest opinions about the fighter and how he will almost certainly come up short against Oliveira at UFC 280. In an interview with the All-Star, Burns held no punches when asked about Makhachev, saying, "I heard that Makhachev is very, very good, and he finishes a lot of guys, and has a really good submission game, better than Khabib, but the numbers don't say that." Burns didn't stop there. He later said, "People say, oh, he's the new Khabib. No, he's not Khabib. He lost by knockout. He got taken down by Thiago Moses. He doesn't have a lot of finishes." He continued on by saying, "Look at the finishes that Charles has." He continued, "I think Charles's career is way better than Islam. Charles's striking is way better than Islam. Charles is huge. He's way bigger than me. Charles is on a very good momentum. I do think Charles is gonna win. I don't think it's gonna be easy, but I think Charles just finds a way to put himself in a war. It's gonna be a war, but I think Charles is gonna win, and it's gonna be good." Next, is Makhachev good enough to defeat Oliveira despite Oliveira's amazing career? As you can see, Burns immediately took a metaphorical jab at Makhachev's career in the UFC not being anywhere near as highly regarded as Oliveira's, and that was one of the reasons as to why he would not be good enough to beat him in the octagon. But is that a valid reason to count somebody out? Is looking at what somebody has done when they were younger a valid way to measure what they can do in the future? Of course, Oliveira is no grandpa just yet. At the age of 32, he's actually only 2 years older than Makhachev. However, he has accomplished so much more in the UFC that it makes him seem so much older. Oliveira is certainly a fierce competitor. However, both of these fighters are riding a 10-fight win streak, and neither are going to be willing to part with them, I'm sure. Moreover, don't get compared to one of the best fighters in the UFC for no reason. Obviously, Makhachev is not Khabib. However, he does look like he's going to be one tough customer when he and Oliveira step into the ring at UFC 280. But being a tough-looking customer is simply not enough. Does Makhachev have the skill, the talent, and the patience to take down a seasoned veteran like Oliveira? And similarly, can Oliveira channel what he has in the past and take the vacant throne that is the lightweight title? As of right now, it appears that while most people can appreciate the incredible athlete that Makhachev is and the bright future he still has in front of him, the favorite is clearly Oliveira. But is that the right choice, or is recency bias playing a part in blinding everyone? Should we be forgetting what either of these fighters have done and just focus on who these fighters are and who will match up better against the other? And is Makhachev's style complementary to Oliveira's defense? People who are deep into the UFC right now love to look at Makhachev's brutal and heavy offense and compare it to Khabib, and rightfully so. Khabib has made it a bit more successful than Makhachev has so far. That is not to say that he cannot still find a great deal of success with it. However, it just says that he cannot be seen as the same dominant force as Khabib is. Makhachev loves to use his prowess in wrestling while on his feet and force his opponent to the ground, and then use his fist from there. His knockout count is 4 out of 22 wins, and his decision count is 8 out of 22 wins. But where Makhachev likes to make his money is in submissions. Out of his 22 wins in his pro career, Makhachev has 10 submission wins. It is clear that he likes to use his size and his strength on the ground to will his opponents to a loss. Makhachev's fighting background is composed mainly of Russian combat grappling and sambo, which is a Russian form of wrestling that was used by the Soviets. It is abundantly clear that Makhachev will do whatever he can to get Oliveira to the ground and attempt to win by submission. However, this may not prove to be advantageous for Makhachev when fighting a fellow grappler artist like Oliveira. In 33 wins over his entire pro career, Oliveira has 21 wins by submission and only 9 knockout wins, and only 3 wins by decision. The numbers are not in Makhachev's favor going into this bout, to say the least. However, the grappling style these two fighters have are wildly diverse, which means that Makhachev's heavier approach could prove to be the difference if he was to win. But the tried and true groundwork that Oliveira has provided to fans of the UFC for the past 15 years is tough to beat, and will certainly prove to be a challenge for Makhachev. But is there a chance that he can pull off the seemingly impossible victory that has pretty much all but been given to Oliveira by UFC analysts and fans alike? How can this fight go any other way besides an Oliveira victory? While I pretty much guarantee that Oliveira will win this fight, I think it's fun to speculate and see if there's any data or theory that supports this fight ending in literally any other way. Of course, there are only 2 ways that a fight can go, but there are so many ways to win a fight, and this is where I think Makhachev can make up the admittedly huge gap between himself and Oliveira. While Makhachev is a good ground fighter, his win percentage from submission is 43%, 73% compared to Oliveira's 63%. Odds are, Makhachev loses if he takes Oliveira for a ride to the floor, so his strategy should involve using his heavy game as often as he can. Oliveira has only lost 8 times in his 42 pro fights. However, half of those losses were knockouts, which means that speaking strictly numerically, the best way to beat Oliveira is to try and knock him out. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, Makhachev's knockout record is not that great, as he has only won by a knockout 4 times and has a rather measly 18% knockout rate in his career. The heavy Russian style is essentially the one hope that Makhachev has if he wants to defeat Oliveira, as they are both 5 foot 10 inches, which means neither fighter has the height advantage or the reach advantage. And hilariously, Oliveira is actually 1 pound heavier than Makhachev according to their official bios, so technically he cannot rely on his size at all in beating Oliveira, which only adds to my point. On the ground, Makhachev has no advantage against Oliveira, and if he wants to have a snowball's chance in hell of beating him, he needs to do it standing up. If I were to bet on Makhachev's strategy, I would guess that it would involve a decent amount of high kicks accompanied by spin takedowns, which are 2 popular moves in Sambo, Makhachev's native fighting style. These 2 moves, if executed properly, have a chance of defeating Oliveira. But if you want a more realistic answer, I think that Oliveira's groundwork is simply going to be too much for Makhachev to handle, and his streak will end. But tune in on October 22nd, 2022 to find out. That's all we have for you guys today on the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the content, and we'll see you all in the next video.